Very nice.
Where the heck are your feet? Makes no sense. Oh, hello there. I'm Kaz, and I honestly don't know how to begin this review after covering every game in this series that's been released in North America thus far. So, I guess I'll just start off by saying that Fire Emblem is one of my favorite series of all time. My gripes with certain entries and the fact that over half of the games in the series remain unlocalized aside, to me, Fire Emblem represents the perfect balance between tales of romance and tragedy taken right out of classic fantasy, and strategic gameplay with social interaction elements that help further develop the characters and complemented the story, thus making for a greater overall experience that one normally doesn't see in a tactical RPG. Now, after 4 years of waiting for the next title and one remake that missed our shores, we now have the newest release in the series, Fire Emblem Awakening, for the Nintendo 3DS. So, does Fire Emblem Awakening live up to those burning sky-high expectations? Or does it blaze out quickly on the battlefield? Let's pair up our units to find out. Now, this review is going to be just a little bit different than usual, as we'll be saving the story for last this time. For now, let's get the presentation out of the way. Fire Emblem Awakening is much stronger in sound than it is in visuals, but by no means is less than anything but fine in either category. The game's graphics are good, they're just not great in my eyes. Fire Emblem in 3D have never really gotten along, so while it is the best looking 3D Fire Emblem, it's not what I call a feast for your eyes. The models themselves are fine, they're well rendered, they're detailed, and they move fluently, but textures for hair and clothing look low quality and environments lack the same attention to detail. Also, the 2D sprites, while appreciated, look out of place when you compare them to these characters designed in the third dimension. Speaking of design, the art design, both in-game and promotional, has shifted from the more traditional designs of previous entries to a more anime manga look to it. I guess that's what happened when the character designer of No More Heroes, Yusuke Kozaki, draws your Fire Emblem characters. Yes, the same guy who designed Travis Touchdown also made Chrom. Now, despite Kozaki-san being a good character designer overall, I feel his style is a terrible match for Fire Emblem. But to be fair, all the artwork is really well drawn, and the CG cutscenes are absolutely gorgeous to look at. They're simply exquisite looking, and they make the art design much more justifiable, but I still think having him being the art designer is not a good choice for the series, especially for the redesigns of the older characters, what few that he did. On the sound side of things, as you'd expect by this point, not a single part of it disappoints. Sound effects are standard for the series, but the music is absolutely perfect, right down to the very last note. Hiroki Morishita as the main composer and Rei Kondo of Okami fame are a perfect pair for Yuka Sugioko's style because they did an amazing job with this score, composing some of the best tracks in the series since Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. They set the tone for each moment, each map, every battle, and they are just downright fantastic to listen to by themselves. This is one soundtrack that you will be proud to own. There's also some voice acting which you have the option to switch between the original Japanese voices and the English translations, which is always appreciated, but the English voice acting is surprisingly well done in cutscenes, with veteran voice actors from the Tales of series and the Persona series giving very believable performances.
I believe the woman you want is me! We can't let these things win. Now grab a sword and fight!
The voices in battle and other conversations, however, get really annoying.
I am not delicate.
Fast.
Darling. See?
You will never get more irritated hearing "thank you" in such a short amount of time in a game. Thankfully, you have the option to turn it off, but it's a shame that such talented voice actors are wasted on typical grunts and repeat the same 3 lines over and over again, instead of full dialogue sequences for the entire game. To sum it up, the game looks good, sounds fine, but the wonderful orchestral score puts the rest of the presentation to shame. On to the gameplay. Fire Emblem Awakening is best described as a best of Fire Emblem, taking elements from nearly every installment but still coming off as fresh with some new ideas and classes of its own. The most comparable of these titles would be Fire Emblem the Sacred Stones due to the overworld map and risen encounters. However, Awakening improves upon the Sacred Stones design by balancing the overworld encounters and the campaign without running the risk of manipulating these encounters into a grinding session. Even after beating a few enemies on the map, the game will still provide a hearty challenge, yet it still comes off as the most accessible entry to newcomers thanks to the addition of a casual mode, which removes the permadeath entirely, and can let you go through the entire story without worrying about your every move being the end for a character that you've really grown attached to. Supports are changed once again, though unlike Radiant Dawn, it's a change for the better.
every character can have as many supports as available, and not only are these conversations as interesting as before, if they reach the new S rank, characters can get married and have kids who inherit their parents' skills like another game in the series, which we'll get to in a moment.
Keep this up and someday I may love you more than money. No, seriously.
There's so much more added into this game and so much more depth in place that it's astounding how balanced it is all for newcomers, yet challenging and fresh for veterans. However, it's not all additions. Weapon weight and constitution are removed, as is the trinity of magic. In fact, light magic is nowhere to be seen in this game. Some weapon names are changed in the name of fan service, and certain staple items have disappeared entirely. Attributes in the pirate class are gone, and rescuing is no longer an option. Sort of. Though the rescue command is no longer available, it's replaced by a similar option called pair up, but adds far more depth to battles than just penalizing you for protecting weaker units, and instead gives your units an ally and an advantage in battle. Which leads them to the biggest new addition, teaming up and attacking with 2 units, which the game calls Dual Strike. Ah, clever. You can have 2 units act as one, giving each other stats boosts along with support, launch a powerful attack together, and, if you're lucky, protect one another from enemy attacks. You don't even have to be paired up in order for this to happen, you just need to have 2 units side by side, and you'll be attacking and defending like you would in pairs. This is the defining mechanic of Awakening, and it brings a refreshing new layer of strategy to an already deep tactical RPG series. Though your opponent never uses it, it makes you think about every unit's position on the map, and opens up a ton of possibilities to rout your enemies, let romance quite literally bloom on the battlefield, or even serve as a way of protecting your weaker units until they get strong enough to face foes on their own. All of this makes Fire Emblem Awakening the most advanced title in the series thus far, and best of all, this game has an extensive amount of content to go through that can eat away at your time without you even knowing about it. From paralogs to xenologues, challenges, encounters, street pass and spot pass battles, multiple playthroughs, multiplayer, there's so much to do that it is easily the most packed game available on the 3DS. And that's not even taking into account that the game itself will take you around 25 to 30 hours to beat it, and there's upcoming DLC. However, like most Fire Emblem games, your mileage will vary depending on what I'm sure many of you are wondering why I haven't talked about yet, the plot. Now, I'll be honest guys, as much as I was looking forward to actually playing a new Fire Emblem game after 4 years of waiting and a remake that went unlocalized, I was dreading the story every waking moment. What with the customizable My Unit being an essential character to the plot instead of an addition, the spot pass being blatant fan service, and of course, the possibility of Marth being a character in this game. I was worried that they were going to use this as an opportunity to merely glorify Marth as the compassionate hero that puts the legendary Henri to shame with his heroic adventures, saving the world from Medius, even though that we only got one of his adventures here. And I was right. Don't misunderstand me when I say this, because it is quite a good story, and it avoids my 2 biggest concerns for the story. They don't glorify Marth, and the Avatar actually gets some personality injected into him in the well-written support conversations. Not to mention the characters are spot on. But that's it. The story on its own is not great, it's not up to the series standards, it's not suspenseful or gripping in the slightest. What it is predictable, something I never thought I'd say about a plot to Fire Emblem. Admittedly, every Fire Emblem title had their fair share of RPG cliches here and there, and a few predictable plot elements, but they also had unpredictable twists and touching moments that made you feel a connection to these characters and their world outside of support conversations. Here, there's only one moment that got any sort of reaction from me, and I will fully admit, it was one of the most beautifully tragic, yet emotionally effective moments in series history. I saw so many quote-unquote plot twists coming out from either obvious dialogue sequences or just common sense in storytelling, like your character has amnesia at the beginning because it's an obvious plot device for later on. I don't want to spoil anything, but it felt like something was missing that made this tale less engaging than the ones that came before it. Thing is, there is potential in the story to be right up there with the best in the series that Awakening just doesn't reach. Again, the story we get is good, but I feel there are 2 major issues that hold it back from achieving its maximum potential. The first would be that there is no overworld dialogue. There's not even an opening detailing the background history of the Line of Elise. You're thrusted right into the action in the very first scene. Here, all detail about the world is given through characters before and after battle, and nothing else. It really did make me value how something as simple as detailing a world or a character before going there or meeting them and seeing them with your own eyes from what you learned. Here, all you have to go by is the main characters and the villains, and it doesn't work as good as it should have as the story goes on. In the first half, it worked since we're being introduced to the characters like the Shepherd, their adventures, and their leader, Crom.
Valor pleases you, Crom. So grant me one request. Grant me revenge. And if you do not listen, then to hell with you.
No, not that one, but that's besides the point. The pacing can be a bit too fast at the beginning between these early chapters for what needed to be established during that time. In the second half, the culprit is that there is no overworld dialogue to give any clarifications or details about the land of Elise. Maybe it's just me, but I enjoyed hearing this omnipotent narrator detailing the characters and events that happen throughout the region from a non-biased basis, and see how you'll react to what you see and what happens in the chapters. Awakening did make me appreciate how the other games made the worlds feel more lively and grand, and all the more worth saving its inhabitants from whatever threat may appear, but only because of the lack of such here. And number 2. It seems like the plot's latter half was meant to differentiate itself from the other Marriage Fire Emblem title. I finally get to talk about this one. To longtime fans, Fire Emblem Saizen no Keifu is the pinnacle of the series, localized or not, due to the introduction of the weapons triangle, skills, and lover system, which led to a dark, dramatic, and mature plot that spanned over 2 generations. Though I've yet to play it for myself, I have read some of the concepts and the premise, and it sounds amazing. I'd love to see it brought here to the West, and apparently one of the designers, Masaki Tawara, would love to see it remade as well, but I'm getting off track here. See, there's an argument that can be made against all the titles that have been localized thus far, that they try to replicate and trump Saizen no Keifu, both in terms of design and story, by constantly borrowing mechanics and themes from it without actually succeeding in doing so, but it's much more apparent here than it is with the others because of the multi-generational mechanics. Again, without spoiling anything, instead of doing what Saizen no Keifu succeeded in, it tried to put its own spin on the dual generational plot with much less success. The opportunity to reach its masterful predecessor, which it was clearly inspired from, is missed, and what we end up with is a story that had the potential to be something truly special, but instead rests on the level of good. Fire Emblem Awakening does have a more mature tone throughout its 28 chapters, which is nice to see the narrative evolve, but it doesn't change the fact that, for the most part, the story's execution just doesn't live up to its potential. And there's nothing truly wrong with that because the plot is well written and the characters are just as excellent as ever. It's just a tad disappointing that the overarching plot connecting them all doesn't hit as hard as they do. I know this sounded incredibly negative, but I just want to reiterate, this is a good plot to an excellent game. Just not anything more than good.
This year marks the first decade that Fire Emblem has had a presence in the West since 2003 when Fire Emblem was released. And though it wasn't meant to be so, Fire Emblem Awakening does come off as a best of Fire Emblem while adding in a twist of its own to make it one of the most accessible yet refined entries in the series to date. I admit, I was incredibly critical of Awakening for its faults, but I criticized it so harshly because of what I loved in it and how much I enjoyed playing it. And there is a lot to love about this title. Now, is this the best game like all the critics are saying it is? No. I'm sorry, it's not. It's really not. Granted, it is the most accessible for newcomers, but on the whole, the story lacks that punch in the gut that you get from the other Fire Emblem plots before it. And I will admit, as a very minor nitpick, the character artwork did bother me when I was playing it. That being said, this is easily the best value you're getting for any 3DS game up to this point. And it is one of the best entries in the series, right up there with Fire Emblem Path of Radiance and the original Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem Awakening fully deserves a 9 out of 10. It is a must-have for any 3DS owner or lover of strategy RPGs. And newcomers, you're getting yourselves quite the entry to get yourselves into this great franchise. So, this is the end of the review. But I feel I need to clarify just one little point.
Ever since Nintendo announced Fire Emblem Awakening via Twitter at E3 of all times, I've been constantly hounding them for how poorly they treated the series in the past, like how at their 3DS press conference they decided to not show that and instead show LEGO Batman 2. However, a lot of things have changed in those last 9 months. Fire Emblem Awakening has been shown at numerous press events and Nintendo Direct conferences. In fact, the last Nintendo Direct announced a crossover with Shin Megami Tensei of all things. Heck, they finally listened and gave Fire Emblem Awakening a proper commercial.
This is Fire Emblem Awakening. The choices you make here last forever. So as you team up with allies on the battlefield to command your army of knights, archers, mages, and more, you better make sure your strategy is right on, because every decision counts. This is life. This is death. This is Fire Emblem Awakening, only on the Nintendo 3DS. Rated T for teen.
Way better than the Trust No One that they gave the last one for the Game Boy Advance. True, they messed up with shipping for tons of retailers with Awakening, but being Canadian, I got my copy a week earlier than everybody else did, so I can't really complain about that. What I can complain about or bring your attention to are the crazy ideas they had for the next title before Awakening was made. Originally they wanted the next Fire Emblem to take place on Mars in the distant future of 2011. Kind of ironic given today's time, but as they said, that's not what a Fire Emblem game is. It's a fantasy tactical RPG series that perfectly complements its story and gameplay, and is finally getting the respect it deserves from its own company. I guess when a series is so good, but so mistreated, you have a passion to see the series grow and improve beyond its roots, and for others to experience how great it is. And because of all that happened, I felt the need to voice my opinion on the matter because of this great series not being given its dues by the big N, Nintendo, the people who publish the games. So I guess for all that, I have the talented folks at Intelligent Systems to thank for the quality titles being so good that they deserve that treatment. So, thank you Intelligent Systems. Thank you for making these great games.